Good morning, everyone. Assuming it's morning most everywhere you are listening from. Welcome very much to our 2021 CRSB Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef semi-annual meeting. I'm Ann Wasco. I'm chair of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. I'm a market analyst professionally, and my husband and I are ranchers in Southwest Saskatchewan. So lots of hats to wear, but today I'm pleased to be wearing the chair hat for CRSB. As many of you know, this is our third virtual meeting in terms of semis and AGMs. Thank you for continuing to tune in to this process. Obviously, times have been challenging for everyone. We've been very fortunate to continue to make some great progress on beef sustainability in Canada, and that's a focus certainly for today's meeting, and we're going to share some exciting news with you. We've got an excellent agenda up for you today. It's a 2-hour agenda. We are going to do our best. Everybody's been read the rules in terms of timing to be done within that 2-hour time frame. So 11 o'clock Mountain Time to be finished that if you're following along. As you see on the agenda, we've got updates from council, committees, followed, of course, by an announcement around our Phase 2 Canadian beef industry goals, our long-term goals. We're very pleased to be one of the 7 national organizations that form the Canadian Beef Advisors. These advisors work together to develop the national beef strategy, and we've been drafting long-term goals to advance our industry. The announcement will be followed by a panel discussion focused on consumers and how drivers and motivators may have changed over this past year. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef staff team. Monica Hatteritz, and I'm not sure if she's going to pop up on the screen here, our Executive Director. Of course, Andrea White, our Marketing and Stakeholder Relations Director, and Brenna Grant with Canfax Research Services, one of CRSB's contractors. So you'll hear from both Brenna and Andrea just in a second. I am going to right now actually hand the mic over to Andrea just to give us a little review on some logistics for today's virtual meeting. Andrea?
Thanks, Anne. And I'll turn on my camera so you can see me. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody here. Just in terms of if you haven't used this GoToWebinar platform before, you'll notice that you've been muted as you joined the webinar today. And just to let everybody know that we are recording the session today. So you'll be able to go back and review it again. And also for those folks that were able to register but may not have been able to attend live today. We are going to have a panel discussion with a Q&A later. So in order to ask any questions, we'll be going to be using the chat function in your control panel. You can see it near the bottom of your screen. And if you have a question, you can put it in at any time. And you just type in the question and those will come to us and we'll be able to moderate that Q&A through that channel function. Just to let you know, on the right-hand side of the screen that you see there, the little circled notes page, we've uploaded some of the speaker biographies for our panel discussion speakers later. So if you're interested in looking at who's going to be speaking, that is there. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Anne to continue with the agenda.
Great, thanks, Andrea. So again, we won't be stopping for questions, so I urge you to use that, that question selection there. Before we launch into the agenda, I just want to recognize our voting members, which are represented here on this slide. I'm so proud to showcase this slide today, and every other meeting that I speak to, and our staff use it as well on a very regular basis, because it shows the organizations that are demonstrating leadership and committing to a science-based, multi-stakeholder approach to advancing sustainable agriculture. So again, thank you to our members. Without you, we would not be able to make the great progress we have over the last number of years. And I think we'll just flip over to the next slide and you can see, certainly we talk about journey in terms of beef sustainability and we're on a journey. Certainly, this is CRSB's journey. It's in terms of a timeline, and it shows some of our major milestones along the way. 2014 doesn't seem all that long ago, but there's been so many key things that have occurred over the last while. We've made great progress, and we're going to go through a lot of the recent milestones here in our semi-annual meeting today. But again, just a reminder of how far we can go when we all work together. So I think what I'll do now, just to stay on time and stay on agenda, is I'll move into my chair report. And again, the council mandate to provide guidance and final decisions on the activities of the CRSB. We'll flip over to the next slide, Andrea. I think, you know, we've got a great team around us. The past 7 months, so we would have had our AGM last fall, so this is the next time for us to meet. And the past 7 months since that meeting have certainly been busy, to say the least. We've required a lot of thinking outside of the box, as many of our members will attest to, even in the world of COVID. We know many of our members have had to adapt to their business models to the changes that have occurred. We've heard such great, creative, innovative, encouraging stories from all across the supply chain and beyond. So again, we're in good circles to be thinking about how to think outside of the box. CRSB Council has met 5 times since the AGM last September. The CRSB Council, just as a reminder, is elected by the voting membership near that time of the AGM. Last year was our first round of electronic elections, and we will be following that same process or a similar process again this year, just ahead of our AGM, which will be virtual again. And we're certainly hoping by the spring, by this time next year, that spring of 2022, we're going to hold this meeting in person so that we can all celebrate and network and celebrate together. You can see the list of council members on your screen. I'm so pleased. We've got a very engaged council. Thank you to my fellow council members. I know it's a time commitment, sometimes a bit of a heavy lift, but when we review these achievements that we've made as CRSB, we certainly can believe and see that we've accomplished a lot. So our key areas of work for the CRSB Council, there we go. Certainly, I've got 4 kind of points I just want to cover here, but certainly the certification program has been growing rapidly. So CRSB certified, 12 million pounds of beef have been sold through the program since 2018. We've had strong supply chain uptake, particularly over the last 7 months, and you're going to hear some more from our framework committee on that in a second. And we've also, as council, set some pretty ambitious goals for growth in terms of the certified supply chain. We'd like to add another 7 million pounds of beef to the program this year and at least 2 new users of that certification mark. We've been focusing a lot of time on building relationships and engaging with our international partners. The Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is undertaking a global goal-setting process similar to Canada's. CRSB and many of our Canadian members have been actively participating in that process at the GRSB and ensuring that our perspective is well represented at the global level. As many of you know, the United Nations is hosting a food systems summit this fall. It's the first in 25 years. We at CRSB are engaging in the Action Track 3. That's focusing on boosting nature positive production to make sure the environmental benefits of beef in a sustainable food system are understood. I encourage you to learn more and get engaged if you already aren't. Under the collaboration piece, certainly we've started a number of new collaborations. We've become a foundational partner on the Canadian Cattlemen's Association Environmental Stewardship Award and also Alltech Canada's Planet of Plenty Award program. We continue to participate in multi-stakeholder initiatives to advance Canadian agriculture, including the Canadian Agri-Food Sustainability Initiative, the Agriculture Sector Core Planning Team, and the Canadian Beef Advisors. From a business perspective, we refreshed the 3 CRSB committees this year. You're going to hear more from those once I'm done here. Thank you to all of those that have committed their time over the past 2 years and those that are going to serve going forward. We've also established a governance committee that is going to oversee the council elections this year. Last but not least, we have a number of strategic priorities this year, including reviewing our 3 to 5 year business strategy and plan, diving deeper into paid advertising to maximize communications impact and consumer understanding of the environmental benefits of beef, and ramping up the uptake of the National Beef Sustainability Assessment. We'll flip over, I'll finish up here and then hand the mic over in a second here, but certainly wanted you to get this in your calendar early. Save the date for our AGM this year, September 28th. Again, it will be held virtually. More details will come. And remember, ahead of this meeting, we're going to be doing a call out for nominations and elections for council. I encourage you to reach out to myself, to any staff, if you're interested in running for a council seat or want to simply learn more what it's all about. With that, I'm going to stop here with my council report, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Greg Bowie to present his committee's report for the framework.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone. And as Anne said, I assume it is morning for most of us. My name's Greg Bowie. I represent the Alberta Beef Producers on CRSB Council, and I'm also the chair of the Certified Sustainable Beef Framework Committee. This committee oversees the implementation and delivery of the CRSB's certification framework. We have a great team on the committee, as you can see on the slides. We've had 2 meetings since we refreshed our committee back in January. We've got some returning committee members and many new faces as well, which is also great to have. Thank you to those individuals and their organizations for their dedication. Next slide. Yep. This is a snapshot of the impact report for the certification program that the committee publishes every year in the CRSB's annual report. Since the program fully launched in 2018, we have made great progress, thanks in no small part to the immense amount of work by our partners who are listed on this slide, and many of which are joining us today. Currently, there are approximately 1,300 farms and ranches and 4 processing facilities that are certified under the program. Those processing facilities include 2 Cargill facilities, the JBS plant in Brooks, and Atlantic Beef Products in PEI. We also have 5 companies audited to track, beef, and deliver CRSB claims. They include Intercity Packers, Cardinal, Centennial, and 2 Cargill facilities. Next slide, please. In addition to the impact report, a few achievements this year, including onboarding Ontario Corn-Fed Beef as one of our certification bodies for Ontario feedlots. We are pleased to have this new partnership in place. We also extended the remote auditing exception policy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll also be reviewing our chain of custody requirements to help enable further supply chain uptake. We have a few initiatives getting started now to help us prepare for the review and update of the framework that will be formally kicked off next year, including a member consultation in June and September that Wilton Consulting Group is leading. Please keep an eye out for the communications around an upcoming survey in June and 2 workshops in June and September, so we can get your feedback on what's working well, what we need to improve, and how we can improve it. We are also doing standard to standard and program to program level benchmarking with NSF International and working with the International Social and Environmental Accreditation and Labeling Alliance, also known as ISEAL, on our monitoring and evaluation systems. We've made great progress, but there's still work to be done. The committee will continue to meet on a monthly basis, and we will be asking for your input on our work throughout the year. We encourage you to get involved. The more feedback we receive, the better our work is. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Tom Lynch-Staunton for his report.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to assume you can hear me okay, Andrea?
Yep, it's all good.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks for having me, and I'll give a very quick Science Advisory Committee report. Just to reiterate, the mandate of the Science Advisory Committee is to provide scientific analysis, advice, and supporting information regarding beef sustainability to the CRSB. The committee oversees the sustainability benchmarking and strategy in the project's pillar, and of course, starting to do our next iteration of the National Beef Sustainability Assessment, which I'll talk about in a moment. Next slide, Andrew. So I wanted to outline the 20 people that make up the committee from the various organizations. I'm coming in from one of the ENGOs. We've got a few other NGOs on the committee as well. Beef producer associations, you can see the names here. I won't name everybody. Academic institutions, and of course, our very valuable subject matter experts. And I have to note that the one person probably the most important to this committee who's not on this list but should be is Brenna Grant, who essentially keeps everybody in order and everything running smoothly. And without her, I don't think we would be nearly as far as we are. So I just wanted to acknowledge Brenna for doing an awesome job on keeping everything moving for this committee. Next slide, please. So the Science Advisory Committee really has oversees two areas of work. The first one that I'll talk about is the project's inventory. The project's inventory consists of an annual survey that we run every year for researchers and organizations to submit projects that help achieve our sustainability strategy goals. Next slide, please. And so really the purpose of this project's pillar, this is a nice schematic to kind of show you what it's really trying to do. So it's really to align on the top there with our sustainability strategy goals, connect organizations and researchers to see what's being done across the country on cool projects that help us achieve our goals, allows researchers to look at these projects and perhaps coordinate and collaborate resources if they're working on similar things, or if somebody's answering a question that really ties into their own research that they're doing, or what they're trying to do to achieve one of the goals. And as well as a very nice communication tool to look at all the projects that are improving upon are helping us improve upon the metrics outlined in the sustainability goals. Next slide, please. The next area of work is really sustainability benchmarking, and we do this through the National Beef Sustainability Assessment and Strategy. Our last one was started in 2016, or sorry, completed in 2016. And that was a life cycle analysis of the Canadian beef industry, the first that we've done before. And really what that assessment did was look at the economic, social, and environmental aspects of our industry and really create a benchmarking tool for us to look at where we're doing well and where we could do improvements. And it's been such a valuable piece of work, and now we'll be going on to the into the next iteration update of that strategy, identifying gaps that needed to be filled, but also to see how we're working on the various goals we set about in 2016. So now we're moving into the National Beef Sustainability Update, which we have just approved. We put out a request for proposals last year and chose the group AGICO, who will be leading the main components of the National Beef Sustainability Assessment. They will be leading the environmental LCA and land use sections, which will be great. They did already complete a hay life cycle inventory for the CRSB. The social LCA will be led also by Group Agico in collaboration with Canfax Research, who now has a very qualified expertise on social assessments. So that will be a nice collaboration. And then the economic piece will be a collaboration between a master's student at the University of Manitoba, Aaron Nodal, with Canfax Research Services. And that project will be starting tout de suite. That's French for right away, just for everybody on the call. Okay. So how is it developed? So these projects are huge, complex projects. As anyone who still remembers the 2016 assessment, lots of data, lots of information to gather to really get again, another benchmarking baseline for our industry, see where we're looking at the metrics from the last assessment and then filling in those gaps. So it'll essentially take about 2 years to complete. We have the Science Advisory Committee that I'm representing today, with 20 people to provide oversight and connections and networking, as well as good expert oversight as well from the researchers that are on the committee. A large component of this is data collection through literature review, surveys. Yes, there will be surveys to the producers and other players in the beef industry, so you will be expecting that. The last one was quite comprehensive. Similar, maybe not as quite as much detail, but still we need those surveys to really get on the ground data. That leads into modeling. Modeling to really find out where our impacts and indicators are. For example, areas of land use, what types of land use we're doing, our greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of beef, those types of indicators that are assessed, and then final reporting, which we expect will hopefully be in 2023. Next slide, please. Lastly, within this new assessment, the CRSB has been identifying not only priorities but gaps to fill. And since 2016, we've been able to have many projects where researchers have been looking at these gaps, and a lot of these gaps in data will be reported on through the NBSA, but will also give us opportunity to find other areas where we're looking for information. And so these research priorities were developed and updated in June 2020. And a lot of this work will be going into the NBSE. And so thanks to all the researchers who are currently already working on filling some of these gaps. I know some of this research will get into that new sustainability assessment. And I believe that is the end. And I believe I will be passing it on to Crystal for the communications report.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. And thanks for the French translation. That was extra helpful of you. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Crystal Mackay, and it's my honor and privilege to serve as chair by Tom as the Communications and Marketing Committee Chair. Our committee, as the name implies, provides direction for marketing strategies to align with mission, vision, principles, and the very important piece about building trust in sustainability of Canadian beef. This past year, we did a call for volunteers, and we're pleasantly surprised with the response. We have a great team on our committee, seriously some of the best communicators in the country in the beef space. You can see some of the names on here, a really great cross section, and with a sincere thanks to everybody who serves on this committee that makes some of the highlights I'm about to share come to life, with special thanks to Andrea White for all the behind the scenes work of making our committee and the whole CRSB look good through our communications and marketing. Thank you. So 2020 was quite a year, as we will say, and you can say quite a year in many different tones. And I think we can all be very proud of everything that CRSB accomplished on the communications and marketing side, despite no in-person opportunities, which were originally part of the plan. So it was definitely busy and rewarding. And I would say 2020 was a great time to reset as we embarked on developing a 3-year marketing strategy. So as we know, the first years of building up CRSB was a lot of internal communications. It takes a lot of effort to get all those logos on a slide. Each logo represents a lot of time and energy and effort on both sides of the equation. So a lot of building. So moving forward, we're like, okay, we're at this place now. Let's invest in the strategy. So we worked with Contact Marketing Agency and Nourish Food Marketing to develop a robust 3-year strategy and plan to take us to the next level with communications, including that piece that many people have been looking for a while, which is direct to consumer marketing, as well as tools that our partners can use for marketing. It's absolutely time to share the good news about what's happening with sustainable beef with the rest of the country, other than the people on our call today. So as a result of that, we developed this website, beeffortheplanet.ca, which was after feedback from many of our members and partners, as well as from our ad agency friends, to say the beef sustainability story is complicated, and we need to make it simple and clear and have a really user-friendly experience for people. So this website has not only been useful for our direct-to-consumer work, as well as the base for social ads, it's also been really helpful for our partners to use to share the beef sustainability story. So if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to do so. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to say a huge pat on the back to all of us who is part of this, as well as every CRSB member can be really proud that this website won the Canadian Agri-Marketing Association Award, not only for Best Consumer Website, but also for Best in Show, which would be Grand Champion equivalent for those of you who show cattle, to say Grand Champion of Public Relations on a really modest budget up against some really big competition. So that would be like the homegrown heifer that wins it all. That's this website. So we can all be really proud of that. So when we look at our overall strategy around marketing and communications, you can fit things into 4 buckets, starting with the public campaign. We've got our CRSB certified engagement, which includes industry engagement as well as consumer and public engagement, and then of course over to social media. And there's lots of details under each one I'm not going to cover. But I will say that look for some information coming out later this year regarding our work. We heard Anne mention around the National Beef Sustainability Assessment, and lots of engagement opportunities reviewing within our framework. And when it comes to communications, a lot of people think about the public specifically, and I'm really looking forward to the panel coming up shortly. But there is a lot of engagement and communications needed for our own food system partners, including many of you and your colleagues. So this year, you'll definitely see a big increase in social media. With thanks to Kim Coyle, a new contractor that's been hired to focus time on social media. We have 800 new followers, and we've launched a LinkedIn page, and a lot of business to business happens on LinkedIn. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to go to LinkedIn and connect with us there. That's your call to action from our committee, to connect with us on LinkedIn and or any of the other social media channels that maybe you haven't connected with yet. If we had to summarize CRSB's communications and marketing, it could be summarized best with partnerships. And I'm going to share a couple of examples with you. It really, I would say, I've never seen such great partnership aligning and leveraging as I have in the last year. And I call it Team Beef. I'm really proud of it. I am hardwired collaborator. I think I'm also a Scottish farm girl budgeter. So I think this is absolutely incredible, the amount of reach that Team Beef achieves when we work together. And so partnering with industry partners obviously has many benefits. This is one, Cooking by Degrees in the Toronto Star. What a great target audience. We always want to talk to urban consumers, and it's a very pricey and difficult endeavor. But this project is a great example. 16 chef interviews, 16 beef producer profiles, plus ads for each partnering organization. Absolutely incredible, with kudos to Owen Roberts, a well-known ag journalist who also has an affiliation with the Toronto Star, who helped make this happen. A really great reach. Toronto Star is actually the largest circulation of any newsprint in the country, which is always surprising to people. And of course, although the print ads are done December and January, this lives online, and with social media, we can promote any of these things anytime. We also partnered with dietitian Carol Harrison, who's well known in the dietitian world, as well as a big supporter of agriculture, and the public and stakeholder engagement team, Amy's team, on a series of TV spots in Ontario around Canada's Ag Day in February. And that had a reach of over 800,000 people. And again, great target audience. This spring, we'll be partnering again with PSC, as well as Ducks Unlimited Canada and Nature Conservancy Canada, on a campaign in Canadian foodscapes with Rick Campanelli, which will air on global CTV and specialty channels, again, coupled with digital content. And again, really cost-effective use of CRSB time and money, partnering with these groups and leveraging it with existing celebrities. Moving over to marketing certified sustainability, we've had great support from our retail and food service members. And this is something that when I started volunteering my time with CRSB, I get really excited about, to say the CRSB and even team. But when we start leveraging and using partner channels, that's when things really get exciting for us, that we can really multiply the value of what we're all doing better together. So great support, significant investment in messaging. You know, here's a few examples. The visuals are incredible. Every time I see a CRSB logo on an ad or a menu, I get really excited, and I hope you do too. I would definitely say momentum is gaining for this type of sourcing, and promoting the fact that people are proud to be part of this effort. So we have 5 companies now sourcing and making significant marketing investments in promoting the fact that they partner with us and are part of CRSB, and working closely. CRSB team works closely with those who have made these commitments to market with customers. So for example, Gordon Food Service and ICP, and then direct to consumers, of course, we know McDonald's, Harvey's, and Chop Steakhouse. CRSB staff have been working closely with partners, and expect we'll have some more exciting news from existing and new framework users coming up later this year. So we hope these announcements will foster even more excitement. And if you think about how momentum builds, it starts with a small circle. In 2014, as Anne mentioned, on that journey of sustainability is not that long ago, a really small circle, and then the momentum keeps building. And I remember there used to be one logo on this slide. Now we've got 5 or 6, and momentum will keep building and growing as people are proud to be part of this effort. And I would say to all of you, the excitement is building. You see these pure and applied communications and marketing strategies in ads and menus and social media and websites. That is awesome. But this is a movement, and to be part of a movement, you need to move. And they say the average person now has 300 people in their own social channels. So I encourage each of you to take on the CRSB torch, the logo per se, and share a message that you're part of this and you're excited to make this happen. And you know, even if it's a link to the website or the CRSB logo, you're part of the semi-annual meeting today, or you're really excited about some aspect of sustainable beef and share it on your social channels, whether it's your personal ones. Pass a note along to your social media manager within your organization and say, you know what, we should really be sharing this story because it's absolutely exciting. As we say, I love the tagline from Guardians of the Grassland. It turns out maybe what you thought was the problem is actually part of the solution. And this is absolutely a team effort. It's my pleasure to present the Marketing and Communications Committee report. Thank you. And I will turn it back to you, Anne.
Okay, there we are. Thank you so much, Crystal. I'm getting some echo, just so you know, Andrea. There we go. Thank you, Crystal. What a great update. Thank you, Tom. Another great update, and Greg. So, and all of you committee chairs, the three of you, for the extra time that you put in. It's obvious we've got some, as you say, great momentum, Crystal, and that torch, we're all taking it along with us. So thank you for that. And again, I know we're hustling through these updates, but use that question box to send us our questions. We'll get them answered, right online if staff can, and or after the fact. So at this point in time, just to keep us rolling along, I've been joined by the beautiful Brenna Grant. Brenna is, of course, with Campax Research Services. She probably doesn't need an introduction, but she's going to get one anyways. She provides secretariat support to the Canadian Beef Advisors. And again, as I mentioned at the onset, the CRSB is proud to be one of the 7 Canadian Beef Advisors in that group of national organizations. And this is the group that, of course, develops the National Beef Strategy. And now the next step from that strategy is certainly to define long-term goals for the industry. And again, thanks to all the stakeholders that have provided input along this various stages of the process. And Brenna, special thanks to you for carrying that torch forward in terms of secretariat work. So I'm going to hand it over to you to give us the update on goal setting.
Thank you, Anne. And we're coming to the close of over a year's worth of work. So it's really exciting to be here today. When we started, the intention was to set ambitious and realistic goals going out to 2030 for the beef industry. And these are designed to be stretch goals that push the industry to strive for something we would not achieve without setting these goals. And when we first started this process last year, we identified several outcomes that we wanted to achieve. The first was that these goals would be science-based, measurable, improvable, and reportable. We wanted to credibly demonstrate that the beef industry views these topics as a priority and core component of our industry. But to do that, we had to strike a realistic balance of what we could actually achieve, while also being proactive around these areas. And to do that, we used an iterative process to develop the goals, starting with a literature review, as well as doing a number of interviews with stakeholders that had expertise in each area. And then we had our producer task force with representatives from the Canadian Roundtable of Sustainable Beef, the Beef Cattle Research Council, the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, and the National Cattle Feeders Association. And many of you attended the webinars last fall where we did some message testing and we got feedback from a broader stakeholder group. But then we went back through that process again with our producer task force. And we also did something a wee bit different with these last 4 goals that we're launching this week. Just because some of these really moved further down the supply chain away from the producers. And so first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Reynold Bergen from the Beef Cattle Research Council, who was really integral in the beef quality and food safety group. And we actually have pulled together a completely separate group, including researchers, packers and processors, Canada Beef, and others that had expertise to speak into that area. We also did a number of technology interviews with different stakeholders with expertise in that area. And so with that, I'm really proud to be introducing these last 4 goals today. And the first one is water. There are approximately 1.6 million acres of wetlands found in grasslands across Canada. And protecting wetlands is a priority for multiple reasons. The first is that wetlands are a natural carbon sink. And drainage of wetlands across the Canadian prairies is estimated to have resulted in a loss of 43.5 million tons of carbon that was previously stored in sediment and vegetation. This is equivalent to around 33.5 million cars. Beef producers generally maintain the wetlands on their land, and this action prevents emissions of carbon that would be released if wetlands were converted to other land uses. Secondly, wetland drainage increases watershed connectivity and nutrient exports. While grasslands act as a natural filter for nutrients through plant uptake and higher infiltration rates that also reduce runoff. And research has shown that the characteristics that promote nutrient retention and protect water quality are observed and more prevalent on grazed grasslands than on ungrazed grasslands. So good grassland management around wetlands has proven to be key in reducing impacts on aquatic systems. And it should be recognized that the effect of specific practices on water quality is highly dependent on precipitation levels. So buffer strips may reduce sediment and nutrient loss during extreme rainfall events, but they may not be needed in semi-arid regions or cold climates where runoff levels may be low. So it's really critical to choose regionally adapted strategies as appropriate across the country. And for that reason, our first goal is to promote practices that maximize water quality and retention to deliver healthier landscapes, resilience to drought and flood events, and groundwater recharge as appropriate to the region's precipitation. Our second goal is to improve water use efficiency in the beef value chain. And we need to recognize that in our first National Beef Sustainability Assessment, Canada has a very low water footprint already, and that we are always on the lookout for ways that we can improve this. But we also need to recognize that when you have a very low water quality footprint, some of those trade-offs can also be high. And that's one of the balancing pieces we need to do. And then third, build recognition by the public and policymakers of the benefits provided by grassland ecosystems, including some of those things that I already mentioned around the role of wetlands being carbon sinks, the filtration role, as well as that resilience to drought and flood events, as there's so many conversations right now around climate and resilience of our food systems. The next goal is on people, health, and safety. And the Canadian beef industry prioritizes the well-being of people throughout the supply chain, supporting policies that improve people's health and safety. And over this last year, we have really seen organizations and individual companies across the supply chain work closely with public health and labor officials to develop protocols and implement rigorous risk mitigation practices to keep people safe while continuing to provide food to consumers. And we know that the red meat processing sector has well-established worker health and safety procedures, systems, and practices to help protect its workforce. But we want to continue to improve. And our first goal is to create a culture of safety across the beef industry supply chain. Agri-food industries, which is really broad throughout the supply chain, do have higher injury rates. And historically, between 1990 and 2012, fatality rates declined on average 1.1% per year. And so our goal to reduce serious, fatal, and fatigue-related incidents by 1.5% per year up to 2030 is really recognizing the good efforts that are already been happening in this area by provincial agricultural safety boards, and is really designed to accelerate those efforts. And we're going to do this recognizing the importance of incremental improvements by supporting education, awareness, and improvements in farm and ranch safety. Our third goal is around beef quality and food safety. And the first is to establish the inherent quality and value of Canadian beef in domestic and export markets, which supports comparative equivalency or superiority to alternatives. And that begs the question, how do you define superior? And that definition is really based on the specific market in question, as the attributes focused on will vary depending on consumer preferences. And this will then be compared to major competitors within that market. And we know that food safety is an important piece of the demand for beef around the world. And Canada has a strong reputation for food safety. However, it must be maintained and improved upon by developing improved food safety interventions and technologies that counteract multiple pathogens and methods to quantify the effectiveness of those interventions on an ongoing basis. And this is occurring in all of our major competing countries. And that's why we have goals around removing internal regulatory impediments, as well as supporting the development, regulatory approval, and adoption of improved food safety interventions. But coming back to the beef quality piece, our third goal here is to increase the value of AAA and prime carcasses to be equivalent with the US by building demand for all cuts in the carcass. We know that AAA and prime provide a consistently satisfactory eating experience for consumers and really supports beef demand. And when there is a price signal in the marketplace, producers will respond with increased production. Our final goal is around technology. And it is expected that technology will evolve more rapidly over the coming decade than it has in the last 40 years. Advancements in technologies have the potential to disrupt and transform agriculture and agri-food supply chains. And this will make the coming years very interesting. But one question is, how quickly can things happen? Historically, animal agriculture has adopted new technologies at a slower pace than other sectors. But these adoption rates really do vary throughout the supply chain. And it should be remembered that these goals are for the entire supply chain, not just primary production or the distribution system. But starting at primary production. Smart farming, also known as precision farming, has the potential to make farming more profitable and reduce the environmental impact. And that is why it is really at the nexus of these conversations of sustainability, where we bring the environmental and economic and social conversations together. But all technology needs to start from solving an existing problem that is recognized as a problem, rather than having technological solutions come in search of a problem to fix. So every technology needs to have a tangible benefit to the sector adopting it. And as the cost of technologies become more affordable, that cost benefit needs to be evaluated and validated at a commercial scale. And we need to remember that the return on investment to technology can come in many different ways. It may be financial, it may be through time savings, or through process improvements. And so here in these technology goals, we look at things like traceability and export digitization, where entire generations of technology can be leaped to bring systems into the 21st century and better serve an export-oriented industry operating at the speed of commerce, and thus avoiding trade impediments and delays in product movement. And not only must the beef supply chain implement technologies to stay competitive, but technology has the potential to support new products and investments and really drive economic development. It should be recognized that technology frequently needs a dedicated operator and therefore isn't always a labor savings. In fact, it may actually increase labor demands, just of a different sort. But that technology can also have other benefits. such as assisting in worker conditions and other economic viabilities within an operation. And so while technology brings the potential for greater transparency in production systems, there's also the need to address acceptance of technological use in food production and making sure that there is acceptance of both the domestic and international consumer for the technologies being implemented on farm. So with that, we do have a number of infographics that are available for all of the goals that have been developed, as well as fact sheets with more information on each goal. You can go to beefstrategy.com to learn more. And I'll hand it back to you, Anne.
Great. Thanks so much, Brenna. That has been a very large project for our industry. It's an exciting time, certainly for the industry. We hope that CRSB members and stakeholders understand the leadership that's being demonstrated by going through this process, setting these goals, and obviously collectively working forward together faster. It's been a busy time, and again, there's a lot of places to go get things like these infographics you see on the screen right now, and certainly move along and talk about these very productive and aggressive, as Brenna suggested, stretch goals that the industry is reaching for. So good job, good work, and we'll continue to move along. And again, just a reminder to put the questions in the question box, and staff will certainly get to those. So thanks for all your work, Brenna, on this very large task that has certainly been, I hope, rewarding, and again, like I say, an exciting time for our industry. At this point in time, I think we'll move over to our feature presentation. And we have a panel, as you saw on our agenda. I'll get Andrea to bring up the next slide. The panel is going to focus certainly on using consumer research to understand sustainability drivers and motivators, something we're all interested in learning more about, especially now, as drivers and motivations certainly could have changed over the past year. And I sense that that's a message that we might hear a little bit about. So I won't take up any more time. I'm going to hand this mic over to Andrea White to introduce the lead for our panel. Thanks. Andrea, over to you.
Great, thanks, Anne, and welcome to everybody here. In a fashion that doesn't usually happen at a CRSB meeting, we're actually a little bit early on the agenda, so we're just waiting for our moderator to join the group, but I will get started with a bit of an introduction here. So we're really pleased to have this panel discussion today. I think it'll be really interesting for lots of the folks attending, and really at all points of the beef supply chain, all the way from the primary producers all the way through to the retail food service and every point in between and beyond. Just to let everybody know, if you're not aware, the CRSB has conducted some of our own research. Initially in 2018 to help us make some of the final decisions regarding the logos and claims that we now use with our certification framework, as well as to gauge, general awareness about the CRSB sustainability, people's beef consumption, their purchasing behaviors, their consumption behaviors, and overall perceptions of Canadian beef. Our intention at the CRSB is to repeat these research activities every 2 to 3 years, and so we're planning another survey in 2022. So our last one was in 2019, and so I think we can all agree that a lot of things in the world have changed since then. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how and if things have really changed since that last study that we did in 2019. So we have a great panel of experts here today from many different walks of life. They'll be able to share a variety of perspectives, and again, everybody here uses some of this consumer research in whatever form that theirs takes to guide their marketing, their product offerings, and also just building that overall trust in the food system. So I will start off and introduce our panelists for today, and then I'll be able to hand it over to David, who's going to moderate our panel. And multitasking with the slides. So today with us, we have David Coletto of Abacus Data, and he'll be moderating the panel discussion for us today. He's the CEO and a founding partner of Abacus Data, which is a full service market research and strategy firm based in Ottawa. And with over a decade of experience in the industry, him and his partners founded this about 10 years ago. And since then, it's grown into one of Canada's most respected market research firms. And there we see David. Hi, David. Give it a wave. David's worked with many ag and food organizations, including the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. Amy's going to share a little bit of their work that they did with Abacus this past year, Dairy Farmers of Canada, Farm Credit Canada. So you can see some of our members here at the CRSB have been benefited from the research. David has a PhD in political science from the University of Calgary, and also graduated from Carleton University with his undergrad and graduate degrees. He's also an adjunct professor at Carleton University. Michael Young, can you give us a wave? Michael's the president of Canada Beef, which many of you know is the agency responsible for marketing beef in Canada, both here and abroad. Michael's worked in the Canadian red meat industry for over 40 years, specializing in beef, veal, and pork marketing, sales, technical and product development, and education, both domestically and in the export markets. So he's got a wealth of experience. Throughout his career, he's promoted Canadian beef, veal, and pork in more than 25 countries and conducted over 300 carcass cutting demonstrations, merchandising, sausage making demonstrations. He's authored numerous technical and purchasing materials, guides, resources, and financial yield and performance analysis. So we're pleased to have him here from the Canada Beef perspective. Amy Peck leads the public and stakeholder engagement team at the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, works closely with the CRSB and many others in the industry, and really to increase that public trust in the Canadian beef industry by supporting, those synergies with the industry, forming the strategic partnerships that we've been able to put together these last number of years, and connecting positively with consumers and the public. So this includes things like addressing industry issues by coordinating key messages, specific responses together, provincial and industry organizations, developing promotional content and campaigns that really highlight those benefits of beef production in Canada. And John Jameson. John comes to us from the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. He's a professional agrologist and certified nutrient management planner. And he joined the CCFI group in 2019 when Crystal Mackay, who's already talked to us today, was former CEO, and he's taken over the mantle from her. So John comes to CCFI after serving as the Deputy Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, and also the Deputy Minister of Regional Development in Prince Edward Island. So he comes to us from the Maritimes, and has also previously served as the Executive Director of the PEI Federation of Agriculture. So he's got a wealth of experience here too. And finally, last but not least, we have Clay Holmes from Intercity Packers, Meat and Seafood. He's got over 24 years of experience in the protein industry, again, a diverse background in marketing with food service, direct sales. He works with, independent and chain restaurants, and has a passion for teaching others how to promote and market protein to their customers. He spent 4 years in the protein category development, leading strategic direction for that category. And I'll just mention that as one of CRSB newest members, Intercity Packers is also sitting on the CRSB Council and help guiding us there, representing that processor category. So welcome to all of you. Just a reminder for the attendees, whenever you have a question that comes into your mind, you can type it into the question box at any time. And we have a few sort of general questions that the panelists are going to address first. And then we'll dig in later near the end for a Q&A session. So all the questions that you can type in, we will try and address some of them. And with that, I will hand it over to David to get started.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Apologies for my slightly tardy appearance. Great to be with you. This is a subject that I have a double passion for. I love beef, and I'm also someone, I think like many Canadians, who are increasingly concerned about climate change and what that's going to mean for my nieces and nephews and myself going down the path. So we've got a great panel here. John, Michael, Amy, Clay, good to see you all again. Just to give you some context, this is the question that I am fascinated with, is how are consumers reacting to, you know, the growing concerns they personally have, the pressures they're feeling by others in their life. We'll talk about all those themes today. We did a survey back in 2019 that found, you know, almost half of Canadians said they either had reduced or were considering reducing the amount of meat they ate. And when you ask them why, health was a key driver, but 4 out of 10 said animal welfare concerns, and almost 4 out of 10 said concerns about climate change were reasons why they were either reducing or considering reducing their meat consumption. So increasingly, sustainability is on people's minds. We do work in a whole range of sectors that whether it's forestry or mining or agriculture, those same questions are being asked about how the products are produced, how the work is done. So I am excited to lead a conversation here with 4 folks who know a lot about this subject. And I want to start with each of you giving us a sense of your role in the beef supply chain or beef sustainability, and what kind of research each of your organizations are doing that are going to provide the insights that we'll share throughout our conversation today. So Amy, I'm going to start with you, and then Michael, we'll go to you next. Amy, over to you. Good to see you.
Good morning, David. Nice to see you too. So, you know, as Andrea had kind of highlighted, I manage the public and stakeholder engagement program. So we're really looking to, you know, maintain and improve public trust in the way beef cattle are raised in Canada. And so, you know, for that, research is vital, you know, to determine what current public perceptions are and emerging trends. And so research that we've conducted, I'll go into highlights of it here in a little bit, but that's how I first met David, is when Abacus Data did quite a widespread consumer research study for us in July of 2020. And we've really used that to inform our forward direction, you know, who our must-win audiences are, and you know, some of those key messages that are going to work best with them to talk about the role of sustainability with the beef industry. And some of the research that we've also done is conducting a media scan. So Abacus also did a 2.5-year look back on some random articles and samples, and looked at, you know, what the media is also saying about the beef industry. So that's just a quick synopsis of what we use research for with public and stakeholder engagement.
And Michael, on the marketing side, I assume, but you correct me if I'm wrong, you're doing quite a bit of research too to try to get in the heads of consumers, know what they're thinking. What's your role in this subject matter? I think the answer is obvious, but I'll let you explain your role, and how does research drive decisions that are being made at Canadian Beef?
Good morning and afternoon to everyone, and hello. Yeah, Canada Beef, we do a lot of both consumer and trade attitudinal style research. This is really important, both from the approach that, you know, what are consumers thinking in that marketplace, whether it be in Canada or whether it be in the international marketplace, but also what do the trade professionals who are buying and selling the products think, because their take on what their consumers want is can be the same, but it also can be different. So it's important for us to rank where we are by market and by segment, and then what opportunity gaps exist for us to provide the information needed. We also do applied research in the form of sensory evaluation of Canadian beef versus best-in-class competitors. We just finished one in Japan, actually, where we looked at U.S. fed beef and Aussie fed beef versus Canadian with the different popular cuts. So research plays a big role in how we plan our investment moving forward and the different tactics that we need to incorporate to get good return on investment.
Man, I would love to be on one of those panels where I get to try all that beef. That's how do you get on that list? I mean, I know it's in Japan, but anyways, Michael, thank you. Clay, I'm over to you. You're probably the closest to the consumer. What's your role in the supply chain and in this conversation around beef sustainability and you know, is Intercity Packers doing research or pulling feedback in from both the customers you're serving as well as the end user who's consuming the products you're selling?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, David. So just understanding sort of where we fit, as you said, we're closest to the consumer, right? So we portion controlled product. We're essentially the last step between the consumer and meal prep. So, you know, whether it's raw, cooked meat or seafood, that's what we do, and then they take it and finish it off and customize it for there. Now we're fortunate to be part of an internationally based company. We have multiple divisions across North America in different facets of food service and retail that are that one step away from the consumer. So we have marketing teams, we have product development chefs, and we get together on a regular basis and sort of take all of this high level information and get a feel for regional trends, international trends, and of course global trends. The challenge then is then taking that information and finding out what's the consumer actually want. Right? It's great to have all of this data and all these things, and we can go down all these rabbit holes. So that's where we really engage closely with our customers, and we have a lot of long-standing customers and great relationships, and we get their feedback. We share information. They do a lot of research, and then of course, at the end of the day, it's the consumer that's taking their credit card, their debit card, their whatever it is to the till that tells us whether we were right or wrong. And then social media, of course, feedback to retail and to restaurants. If you're not heading down the right path, you get told very quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we'll come back to this interplay between what consumers say they want and what they actually do, because I think that's a really important question. But John, I'm going to end with you because you take a bigger global kind of view, looking at our ag sector more broadly, and particularly the role that trust plays in all of that. How do you fit into this conversation around beef supply and sustainability? And I know your organization does quite a bit of research, but maybe you could speak to the bigger questions that the Center for Food Integrity is trying to answer.
There we go. Thanks, David. So the unique, as you mentioned, the unique thing about our organization is that we represent, the whole food system, everything from restaurants right down to farm organizations, government organizations, farm or food businesses, you name it. So our job really is to help them connect with the consumer. And we know there's an opportunity for growth in the agri-food system in Canada, and that's well known. But in order to get there, we have to have that trust. And we have to have people trust the processes and practices that are used to produce that food. So we help support the industry by providing industry resources. We do webinars. We do, you did a webinar for us a little while ago. We do other resources, but we also do some research. And that research that we look at is kind of like I say, a 30,000-foot view, looking at all portions of the sector. And what are the consumers thinking about when they think about who they trust? What information are they looking for? What are the drivers that make them make certain decisions? Are they thinking about animal welfare? What do they think about sustainability? And last year, one of the questions we asked was, when you hear the word sustainability, what does it mean to you? So that information is really good in helping the industry kind of decide what direction it needs to go and what kind of messaging it needs to make.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think your point about trust, especially in an environment, we'll talk about this right at the end, I think, and maybe some of the folks around the room our virtual room will want to know about this, but this in the world of misinformation, right? And how do we control or set the truth? What is the truth, and how do people come to that? I want to look at how you all feel about where consumer perceptions and kind of some of the trends we're seeing. I always get asked in every situation, how is the pandemic going to change what we're seeing? Is it going to fundamentally re-alter it? So I want you to think about your answer in that context. But my theory is that the pandemic's not, particularly around consumer behaviors around food, are not fundamentally re-altering those choices, but it's likely going to accelerate many of the trends that we had seen, and you know, much more cooking at home, those kinds of things. But when it comes to beef and sustainability, Michael, I'll start with you. You know, over the past few years, where has the consumer mind been going? What questions are they asking about, you know, beef and the food that they're eating? And do you see the pandemic altering the trajectory that data was pointing to?
Yeah, great question, David. So the last few years, we've all been trying to unravel or decode how do we reach certain segments of consumers. You know, we have, you know, most of our great consumers are aging, and we've been challenged with trying to connect with millennials as other commodities have, and it's been evolving. And it's funny you bring this up, because COVID has kind of given us all a reset strategy here, in that, you know, with more people being at home, they're cooking, they're rediscovering the kitchen, they're rediscovering their own families, all the appliances they've accumulated over the years. So really, there's so much opportunity out there now, and you know, it's a lot of these changes are here to stay. I mean, we tell from the hits on our website what are consumers looking for, and that, you know, our website traffic for recipes and preparation and different cooking methods has just gone through the roof. You know, we also saw when there was a perception of, you know, a potential shortage in food supplies, you saw people loading up on many commodities. And I always remember the image of the entire meat case was empty, but the only thing that wasn't picked over was the plant-based stuff. I thought that was really interesting. You know, when the rubber hits the road, people want all the stuff they can count on, and that was animal protein. So I think we're all faced with an opportunity here. You know, my father always taught me, you know, never waste a good catastrophe. And we're faced with an opportunity here to provide the information that consumers need to make good choices on the food they're looking for. And they're definitely looking. You know, we know they're out there, they're looking. There's all kinds of opportunity here. So I think these trends are with us. I think we have the opportunity to grow our market share. And, you know, consumers have demonstrated, you know, even with prices going up, potential shortages, they chose beef. Beef was an overwhelming winner. You know, even when the other proteins kind of went the other way for a while in terms of price, beef actually went the other way. It increased in price, but that did not stop consumers from picking up the beef they needed when they thought that there may be some shortages. So we're very encouraged with this.
I mean, there's a number of things to unpack there, but I think first, your comment about that, the plant-based alternatives being the one that's left. I felt the same way when I saw in the frozen pizza section, only the Hawaiian pizzas left there, because I hate Hawaiian pizza. And I think as an Italian Canadian, it's an abomination, but it was proof, right? It's always in how people behave. It was the thing that was left in the freezers. Anyways, John, I want to come back to you, because I think on what Michael said, I think the pandemic, and we did some research with Farm Credit Canada that showed, you know, large majority of Canadians said, I have been thinking more about where my food comes from than before the pandemic started, right? Michael, to your point about empty shelves or empty coolers, for most Canadians, you know, we've been lucky enough to never have to experience the sense that our food security is maybe not as secure as we thought. We also know that you know, most people feel that the agriculture as a whole responded really well to the pandemic. We never saw those empty shelves again. But John, you know, what are you seeing in terms of those consumer trends? And again, is the pandemic creating both an opportunity, as Michael suggests, but also greater risk, because consumers are now asking, I think, more questions? What's your thoughts on that?
there's a few things that I see that really stood out in our research last year. And to Michael's point, I really think there's an opportunity here for the food system to connect with the consumer because they are more interested in the food system than ever before, and probably because they realize now they can't take it for granted. So, you know, the experience of going to a grocery store is quite a bit different than it used to be. But as the pandemic went on, the industry was able to pivot and did a very good job of keeping food on the shelves. And I think Canadians recognize that. And our research saw that quite a jump in how the Canadians perceive the food system in a much more positive light than in the past. So that creates that opportunity. What we have seen, though, on the other hand, is that people are concerned about food costs, and that's something that we've seen over the last number of years. And even though Canada has, you know, relatively low food costs based on our income, people are concerned about the cost of food, and that does create some anxiety. And they're also concerned about the you know, the long-term effect that the pandemic is going to have on our economy. When we dig into our numbers, though, what we see, and Michael touched on this, is a generational shift in that the Gen Zs and millennials may look at the food system quite a bit differently than folks, you know, myself, like Gen X's and boomers, in that they're much more interested in how the food is produced, they're much more interested in animal welfare, and they're willing to make changes in the way they purchase things based on how they perceive that food. So I think, but again, that creates that opportunity because people are interested, and we can do a very good job of connecting with them. So there's a number of things that I see that are trends. I think the pandemic, there will be some lasting changes that come out of it. I would hope that we're able to capitalize on these changes and be able to build on that good feeling that Canadians have for the food system.
And Amy, you know, maybe you want to share a little bit about the research that we did together. But I think for me, the good news headline is, you know, people's perception of beef and beef production and how we do it here in Canada, generally speaking, even if you don't bring up sustainable practices or the certification process, is very positive, right? There's a very small minority who feel any bit of friction or angst around it. It's often like those loud voices we often hear aren't reflective or representative of consumers generally, or Canadians more broadly. But maybe quickly, can you walk us through, you know, a little bit about what your research has showed around that public sense of beef in particular, that we did in the middle of the pandemic, but might be indicative of where it's going as well in the future?
Absolutely. And I think it dovetails really well with what John was saying, you know, about trying to capitalize on this opportunity that's in front of us, where we see this, you know, heightened trust in the way food is produced in Canada. And that's coupled with this really strong beef demand. So now it's really, the onus is on us. What do we do with this great opportunity? So Andrea, I don't know if you can advance my slide. Just really wanted to do quick overview of what we found, as David said, in our research last year, that'll help to position some of these you know, questions that we'll see. So overall, Canadians had a very positive impression of the industry, you know, and especially well regarded for one that produces a high quality product and has a positive economic contribution for our country. So you can see here very high scores on both of those categories. And also we found that most people are still eating a lot, or at least some meat. So there's quite support, you know, for the Canadian beef industry overall. Andrea, you can advance this one. And what we found, you know, that we've seen demonstrated with the research with CCFI as well, is that the impressions are positive for the industry, but they're even more positive for beef farmers. So, you know, again, the industry or the individual, people really want to hear from the families and the people that are producing our food. You know, they have very high trust scores that we see on that research. So this is just showing, you know, a strong majority of people say that beef farmers themselves are working to limit their environmental impact and that they care about the welfare of their animals. So this again is just pointing to the importance of who is presenting those messages and putting forward farmers and ranchers as much as possible. We can go to the next one, Andrea. So, this research also identified some challenges, and we've already spoke about some of those challenges here this morning. Canadians are less certain about industry efforts to limit environmental impacts. And this is where, the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef just plays such a vital role. So we're seeing slightly lower scores for the industry being good stewards and limiting its environmental impact. And John talked about this generational divide, and we really saw this in our own research, that the concerns are felt across all age demographics. They're just felt much more strongly by millennials. And we can see, this research didn't touch into Gen Z, but we expect them to be feeling even more strongly about these issues than millennials do. So you can see here, millennial men, their impressions of beef farmers are comparable to most Canadians. It's the millennial women that really have this lower positive impression. And so, that's something for the public and stakeholder engagement program. This is a must-win audience for us. How can we get that information into channels that they are accessing? So we can go next slide, Andrea, please. And so, of course, with challenges comes opportunities. Some of the opportunities that this research highlighted for us was that, there's more negative content being seen in the media around the beef industry than there is positive. But this negative content doesn't have as strong of an impact on perception as the fact that there just isn't this positive information to counterbalance that. So it says, millennials who feel either negative or neutral about the industry, a quarter of them have never seen positive content regarding farmers and their role in, protecting and preserving environments. So really, it's on all of us individually and as industry partners. How can we, amplify these good stories that are happening? And then, part of this large opportunity, millennials are more skeptical about farmers. We know that's because of this divide, that there's just more generations separated from somebody in primary production. But once they are given more information, key messages and stories to highlight what farmers are doing, the impressions of the industry, almost dramatically improve. So we can go next slide here, Andrew. We'll touch on some messages that we tested. So on the left-hand side here, just some standard key industry messages that we use, around sustainable production, doing our part to fight climate change, working with NGOs. And you can see here that these are, dark green is whether these key messages are very believable, light green is whether they're somewhat believable. And we see across all of these different age demographics that they're feeling that these messages are quite believable to them, which is great. And even some of the ones, for the millennials, we're seeing here that there's a high percentage that agree that we work with, these conservation organizations. So the messages are believable. It's about getting them out there more often. We can advance to the next slide, Andrea. And so as they have this increased understanding of what both the beef industry and farmers and ranchers themselves are trying to do to limit their environmental impact, to see continuous improvement, to protect and maintain native grasslands, we see huge improvements in perception and sentiment. So you can see here, again, some key industry messages on the left-hand side, and respondents saying whether this makes them feel much better, somewhat better about the industry as a whole. And so what's really interesting is that a lot of the key messages tested very similarly, meaning that just about any positive key industry message was accepted and improved perception. So again, as we say, it's just creating these opportunities to get this information in front of these key audiences. We can go forward on this one, Andrea. And so just have some quick overall recommendations that were developed with David and his team at Abacus. So we can go forward, Andrea. First one is really for millennials. So again, this must-win audience. And so they share, similar concerns about the industry overall. but they're much more driven by perceptions of negative environmental impacts, and they're also much more likely to feel social pressure, guilt with eating beef. And that is, again, because of these associated perceptions of environmental impacts. They are more likely to be seeing negative coverage, less likely to be seeing positive content, and that influences current perceptions. So increasing the presence of positive content on beef in channels where millennials are getting their information is going to have a positive impact on their perceptions of our industry. And as it says here, we saw evidence of this within the survey. Again, those key messages really showing a bump in sentiment. And we can go forward, Andrea. And then finally, just this overall recommendations for all audiences is that overall, there's a positive feeling about the beef industry, and again, even more so for farmers and ranchers. But there's misconceptions about our environmental impact and the practices used in the industry. But there's this great appetite to learn more. And so actually, the age demographic that was the most interested in learning more information were millennials. Over 70% of respondents said, I would love to know more about the beef industry. So again, we have this intersection of challenge and immense opportunity. These are the people that are most concerned, but also most interested. So how can we just pair that with getting information into their hands? So communication should focus on the work of farmers. We know this, of course. Multiple surveys are pointing to them as being, high for their trust factor. And we need to emphasize our innovative practices and methods for reducing environmental impact. So I think that's a good overview of the survey that we did, again, July 2020 with Abacus. David, I'll pass it back to you. And if you had any last thoughts you wanted to add on that.
No, I will. You did a great job summarizing it. I think for me, one of the big questions, and Clay, I'm going to come to you on this in terms of its impact in sort of the food service sector is, there was one point in there, Amy, about have you been shamed for eating beef, right? There's one thing, and this is the power of perceptions and the power of social license to order a steak while I'm out with friends, right? And that question is, you got to constantly be fighting against the perception, particularly if people are worried about, what does it say about who I am that I order a steak, right? That identity is a very powerful driver. And if the answer in people's minds is, it means I don't care about the environment, then you're going to lose this conversation. But Clay, from the food service sector, and your interactions with your customers, are you hearing increasing demand among end users and consumers for sustainable products generally, but in particular sustainable beef products?
Yes, absolutely. Sustainability is I think a critical decision maker for people, but I do think it is category specific and kind of depends on how far along the life cycle you are with that product category. So an example I would give you is sort of environmental packaging. I think environmental packaging is very far along the life cycle. It's almost a point of entry. It's a cost of doing business. Like if McDonald's came back and said, we're going back to styrofoam, containers, the world would blow up and people would boycott McDonald's, to be honest, right? So, I think that's very far along. I think for sustainable beef, I don't think that it's as far along in that life cycle and sort of getting that to that point where people know, that it's a good thing, that it's available, that they can have it, that they can demand it, because it's not everywhere yet. But I do think that the environmental movement's been going on a long time. Way back to my university days, started out with green movement. So I think environmental consciousness is a core belief now. And I think that sustainability is a trend that's tagging onto that core belief. And I think we will see it as we get the message out and we let people know that, beef can be good for the planet. Beef can be sustainable. It can be a good choice. You can, let your cohorts know that you do care about the environment by choosing beef, that we see that tack on. Eventually it becomes a core belief, and then it will become just like environmentally friendly packaging, that it's a requirement, a cost of doing business. You will have to have sustainable, and whether it's protein or plant-based or whatever it is, it will get to that point. And I think we're, kind of moving that along with the work that the CRSB is doing.
And Michael, from your vantage point, how fast do you think this demand is moving? Like, do you have time, or is a tsunami coming in which more and more consumers are going to eventually just say, tell me about how this steak, this hamburger is impacting, climate, the environment, and so on? How fast is it going?
So I think I wouldn't say a tsunami is coming, but we are seeing it creep into comments from consumers. So we're very careful when we do our attitudinal stuff, both with trade and with consumers. We do prompted and unprompted. So first we want to hear, if we say something like, do you have any concerns with cattle production? We want to hear what they have to say about that first, because that's what's going to pop into their head. And then we can then go down the line a little bit and prompt a little bit to sort of slice it up and see what's jumping. So I would tell you that in sustainability, and I think John mentioned it a little bit, it is new. It's a bit of a moving target in that it's not properly defined. So we have the opportunity to define that. And I think we all recognize that as we need to take a leadership space, and we have to help define what is sustainability in our sector, rather than have someone else define it. Because I would have to say some of the concerns we've seen have been stirred up by some of the, the plant-based impersonators who are out with their own programs and agenda. So they have brought a lot of these issues to the table, and they're trying to guide their own narrative. So I think some of the great work Amy's doing and we're trying to do and we're going to do is going to be to define what is sustainability for the sector. So I would agree that it's coming. I don't think it's going to hit us like a tsunami, but I think it's important. It's part of the suite. It's not a cost of doing business yet, as Clay mentioned, but I'm pretty sure we're getting there. Like, when we prompt them, and we just finished our quality perceptions audit for both trade and for consumers in Canada and in 9 countries. When prompted, sustainability did come up as something that was mentioned, and it was mentioned in all countries. So it's not as important as price and quality and food safety. I mean, these are the standards, cost of doing business, table stakes that you have to bring. But it's starting to show up. So, now is the time to build our messaging. Now is the time to invest in what we want to say about our industry and make sure we adjust it for the culture and for the sector, because some of these groups we talk to, they want their information in different ways. So we need to understand how can we best feed it to them.
Michael, just to build off what you said there, and I appreciate, the tsunami's not building. And so the conversation about sustainable beef then is one in which right now you're distinguishing between beef that's certified sustainable versus not. This is what the work the Roundtable is doing. Do you, in the research you've seen, and maybe Clay, you can speak to this as well, are some consumers willing to pay a premium, right? Is sustainable beef right now in a category where it could be a premium product for those that have the means? They want to eat beef and they want to sort of have it all. They want it all in their minds, right? Is that an opportunity right now that eventually will disappear as all beef becomes more sustainable? I think is the end goal, or at least consumers to view it that way. But right now, as this transition's happening, is that something you see as an opportunity, or is it not there?
Is that for me, David?
Yeah, Michael and Clay, if either of you have.
I'll go first. I see it as an opportunity. Again, it is evolving, and it's part of the suite of things you bring to the table. And I think you touched on, what consumers say and what consumers do are often different. We need to analyze what that is. And there clearly is a market. We've looked at, the millennial puzzle and how to decode them. And there's a couple of categories. There's the permission seekers who love meat, but they want someone to tell them it's okay, you can enjoy meat. And then, there's the flexitors who kind of sit on the fence and they don't know that they want to reduce their consumption or they don't, So we need to understand what they're looking for and bring it to the table. So I would think for those who are looking for those particular items, there would be a premium down the road. I don't know if there's one out there now. You know, like a lot of these emotional attributes, they're part of a package. You know, and a consumer will make a decision based on the entire package. It's seldom one thing they're looking for. It's a combination of things that fit, you know, what they're looking for in terms of high quality protein that they want to feed their families. So, but I would say yes, it's something we cannot not deal with. We have to work towards it. I do believe it's coming, and it's not going to go away. So, I think we can do it.
Clay, are you getting a sense that your customers feel they have to have a sustainable option on the menu, like more and more, and then not all customers, but those in certain segments that are really serving that market? Is there more and more desire to see you as a supplier have those products available?
Yeah, I think we're still early. Like, we're, as far as sustainable beef goes, we're in the early adopter phase, right? You've got the people that have jumped on board and said, you know, I'm excited about this, and I'm willing to pay for it. And, you know, the research shows that the consumer says they're willing to pay for it. And, you know, we'll see as that goes out. But I'm finding with customers that, you know, I'm, especially since I've been more involved over the last, you know, 3-4 months engaging in these conversations, they're like, oh, I didn't know this was an option, right? And can you walk me through? Can you give me the presentation? Can you let me know what it means? So that's, I think right now it's getting that message out and letting people know that, you know, sustainable beef is an option, and it is something that you can start to put on your menu and something that you can use to differentiate yourself. And then as we sort of continue up that curve, you know, from the early adopters to the mainstream and then on down the line, you know, you're ahead of it. You were one of the first ones there. But the conversations that I'm having, you know, people first go, what is it? The second is, what does it cost? And I think, you know, the CRSB has done a great job over the last year in better defining what that cost is for end users. I think it was very ambiguous when I first got involved 1.5 years ago. So, you know, now it's very straightforward. I can have a conversation and say, here's the value proposition. Here's what the impact is to your cost, which really isn't that significant in the big picture of things. And here's how it can benefit you. And then, of course, the consumers, and the research backs up that this is a direction you want to go. And, you know, basically what Michael has said, I agree as well. Eventually, everyone is going to go. I think we're heading in that direction.
I want to, Amy and John, you both work in sort of broader public policy stakeholder kind of work, and I'm curious your thoughts on the role that sustainable beef and the idea of sustainable beef can play in not just building trust with consumers, but trust with other stakeholders, environmentalists, policymakers in provincial capitals and in Ottawa, right, who are under pressure because consumers are consumers, but they're also voters and they're also political actors, and you know their choices are informed by their desire to eat certain products and not have an impact for those that care about it, but they also want to see public policy that reflects their values too. How does this whole question of sustainable beef fit into that stakeholder and kind of political environment in your minds? John, Amy, either one can kick off. John, I'll start with you. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. So I spent some time as a deputy minister and worked very closely with politicians. So they do, you know, are really attuned to what the consumer is thinking. And I think what we're seeing more of is that there are people that are making purchasing decisions based on ethical or environmental concerns, or that they are, you know, actively seeking out sustainable solutions. We know that from our research. And, you know, the politicians and others are getting this messaging. And I think as we build the sustainable beef program, I think it has a really important role in demonstrating, and what I like to call progress rather than perfection. I think what people want to see and what politicians want to see is that the industry is progressing along a path of continuous improvement. And having a sustainable beef program that can demonstrate that is extremely important. I spent time as a deputy minister in the fishery too. in the fishery. There's a well-established sustainable program called the Marine Stewardship Council certification. Customers have gotten to know that. They've gotten to look for that MSC certification when they're buying seafood. I think the beef industry will eventually get to that point where it'll be. Right now, it's a nice to do, but eventually, you know, to Clay and Michael's point, it may get to be a must do. But we do know that people are looking for that path of continuous improvement, and you need to be able to demonstrate that. And I think this is your opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you've got to demonstrate you have the motivation to do better, right? And that's all. Even I got a lot of reputational work. That's all most people in the public want. They want to know you're moving down that path. You know, you don't need perfect right now, but better is always possible, right?
And I know governments are always trying to figure out what's our role. Yeah. And a lot of times their role is how do we support what we can do. And you know, I remember being in a trade mission in China a few years ago, and I think, you know, Canada Beef was involved in that. And we were touring a grocery store, and we saw English signs everywhere, and we saw you know, the Canadian flag, and I asked the guy doing the tour, I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, you know what? When the Chinese customer sees that Canadian symbol, they know quality and they know safety. And that is something that we need to try to replicate in the minds of the consumers in Canada as well.
Amy, any thoughts on the stakeholder question? And I mean, that's your realm, and you're working to try to, you know, build relationships and build trust. How does this all fit into that?
Yeah, I think one part of the success of our program has really been relying on these stakeholder relationships, you know, and especially the importance of, you know, some of our NGO partners. Where we see that that's really important with consumers is it lends this third-party credibility. And it also shows us value sharing across many different sectors. So, you know, when we have Ducks Unlimited Canada, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, you know, partnering with us on a project like Guardians of the Grasslands, it has this credibility to it that it's not just the beef industry saying, you know, we work to protect native grasslands. It's our partners coming and saying that as well, saying what a vital role we play in that. And so I think that's really where these, you know, new beef industry goals that were announced today, it shows this dedication to continuous improvement. So not only do we have creative assets talking about preserving native grasslands, we have a goal that complements that about maintaining, you know, these 35 million acres. And I think for, you know, the government, that's a little bit outside the realm of PSE, but you know, I think we just need to position ourselves as part of the solution. You know, that farmers and ranchers are really, we care about the environment as well. We're concerned about climate change, and we're partners in that solution. And we were just so thrilled in the throne speech when Justin Trudeau mentioned farmers and ranchers as being part of the solution to climate change. So I think it's just continuing to position ourselves in that way.
Can you still hear me? Okay, good. I don't know why I've lost some volume. Anyway, thank you, Amy. So we've got a number of questions coming in from the audience. We'll spend the rest of the time we have, and if anybody else has some questions, please feed them in. One of them is quickly a clarification, and I think it's important to note, someone asked, like, who are millennials? And I think it's important to recognize millennials are not kids anymore. When I started, I'm turning 40 this year, so I'm an old millennial. I'm not born in 1981, but the cutoff is usually 1980, early 80s to the late 90s, right? So we're talking about almost all of them have probably finished post-secondary. Many are starting their own families. They're making choices for their children. So millennials aren't kids, but Gen Z is the generation that comes after, will be an important group. And why these groups are important is they are just such large consumer groups, right? They're still not as, I think, critical from a food perspective as boomers, who have some more discretionary spending and are going to be thinking about how they enjoy those final great years of their life. But millennials right now are that sweet spot, because not only are they making decisions for themselves, but increasingly for their families. So really important. We had a question about trust I'm not sure who is the best to answer it. So if you've got a good answer, please share. But it was a question on trust for producers. How do we build trust? You know, we talked about consumers, we've talked about stakeholders outside of the industry or connected to it, but what about with producers? And what role do they play in all of this? It's a great question.
I can go first if you want, David.
Sure.
I don't think that there is any larger player in building public trust than farmers and ranchers themselves. You know, as we saw in the research, that is who, you know, consumers want to hear from. They want to hear from the people that are involved at a grassroots level, the people that are caring for the animals day in and day out. There's just this built-in trust point of, you know, this person that's raising animals for me is producing my food, you know, they want to hear their story. And so I would say that, you know, creating engagement strategies where we can get producers to interact directly with farmers, just because, you know, primary producers are now less than 1% of the Canadian population, you know, and they're busy people. That's what we really run up against all the time, is that there's not a lot of extra time, you know, for this external work. But I think, you know, the way that we approach it now is it's almost has to be considered a vital part of what farmers and ranchers are doing. Public trust has got to be built into what you do on a daily basis. It's just so important for ensuring that we continue to have social license and that people, you know, really support the beef industry. So yeah, I can't reiterate more strongly just what an important role farmers and ranchers have to play in all of this.
But
Mike,
if I could build on that just a bit, David, I think Amy nailed it, you know, hit the nail right on the head. The trust capital that we have in the farm communities is extremely important, but it's also important for us to remind our industry partners, our farmers and ranchers, that they have that trust capital. And you need to feel good about what you do in order to project a good image. So sometimes, you know, it was said earlier, we often hear the loudest voices, which are often the negative. And farmers may get down on themselves a little bit when they hear this, and they need to be reminded constantly that our research shows over and over again that farmers are extremely well respected, very trusted. And, you know, again, you have to feel good about what you do in order to feel good, you know, to project that. And I think that's important for us to do, is to continue to get that message across to our industry, is that, you know, you have a lot of credibility here and we need to build on it.
Yeah, in fact, producers are probably the greatest asset, right? Because they're the ones that people trust absolutely the most. There's an interesting question about, it's a long one, but I think it's really valuable. How do we get incentives in the hands of primary producers to be involved in creating the certified supply? And the question goes on, this is from Cecile, who also asks, at what point will producers know that the market demand is growing so much that they should move towards a more sustainable production of beef? Michael, Clay, any sense of? Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I would just fundamentally, I think it's really important that the approach moving forward should not be the tide rises and producers should adopt these costs as these changes and challenges come along. I think it should be fairly clear that, you know, if a producer is going to go down this road, there needs to be a premium involved. Now, that premium may come as a partnership with a certifying body or the purveyor, or, you know, the distributor, I think. But, you know, all of these extra things that producers are bringing onto their farms and their feedlots, there has to be a premium involved. We can't expect our delivery system to absorb all of these trends because, you know, the perception of, well, it's the right thing to do. You know, producers do a lot of things that are sustainable now. You know, there's a lot of sustainability already built into the Canadian beef delivery system. It always has been. it's getting better and better and better. And if for these programs that have been identified as premium worthy, I think they should be built like that, with the producer in mind, so that if there are premiums available, they are shared within the delivery system. I think that's how an industry will move forward. I think it's unfair of us or anyone to expect the delivery system to just simply absorb them. So.
Yeah, and I think I can speak sort of from the consumer end of it, is that, you know, you mentioned other premium programs, and that, you know, it has been demonstrated that the consumer, if you tell a good story and you're giving them the information that they want and providing a product that they need / demand, you will get that premium. And I do think that we're at the very early phase. I keep saying that, right? That I'm having more customers ask me about it. I'm asking more customers, and they're asking me to explain it to them so that they can better understand it. So I think you're just going to see this sort of just continue to chunk away and grab momentum. And, you know, from Intercity Packers' perspective, I mean, we like to think that we're, you know, ahead of the trends and jumping on, and that's why I was a proponent of getting involved with the CRSB. And I always think it's better to be, you know, involved with a program early, if you see value and you feel that it's important, which we do, and then you can also help sort of shape it, guide it, provide feedback as you're part of it to make it better for everybody that's involved, all the stakeholders, for the long term. So.
Got a great question. Two of audience members raised it, and I think it's always the challenge is that both consumers and I think industry tend to go to an idealized version of what agriculture is. I always use the example of you know, I married into a dairy farming family, and I had, as a Toronto city boy, had images of, you know, dairy cows grazing on green, you know, wild herbed, you know, grasslands. And then I went and visited my brother-in-law's dairy farm and saw how milk is really produced. The same challenge I think faces beef farming, in that you've got the idealized grassland, but what about feedlots? Any thoughts on, you know, how do we build? Can we build more positive messaging, images of and role of feedlots, or is it, as Melissa, who asked the question, is it just a lost cause? Like, are we never going to be able to bring people along to the idea of the need to, most of the time, produce food in a mass way to feed the masses? Tough question, but anyone have any insights on the? Yeah, Michael.
I could go first. So I think, you know, feedlots, they're a part of the kind of beef that we produce, not just for Canada, but for the rest of the world. So, you know, I think we can do a better job of talking about the role of feeding and the result. I mean, the bottom line here is the result on the quality and the value and where that goes. So I think we can do a better job, and I say we meaning, you know, us from a communications point of view, or comms groups, on what feedlots are and also what they aren't. I mean, you mentioned it a couple of questions ago. It's the difference between the factory farm versus a farmer's face. So we have to put a face on that aspect of our delivery system, and that aspect is ranchers and farmers. You go to a feedlot, and you know you're going to see cowboys working with animals, and this is important, you know. So I think we can do a better job communicating it, but you know, clearly this is the kind of beef we've chosen to produce. It's what's in demand. It's what's going to get us the premiums, and then everything else around that. Now there's opportunities for all kinds of other programs. Grass-fed category is growing. It's popular in certain parts of the world, and it does represent an opportunity gap for those who want to get into it, and it's important. But if we can avoid, you know, making these definitions where one is better than the other, that would be advisable moving forward. We've got a big world to feed, and there's enough room in it for specialties. If we could focus in on the sort of the fundamental pillars as to why we produce it, how we produce it, how we get it to them, you know, food safety, quality, value, you know. But you are right, we need to do a better job on communicating the face of the people that are producing these cattle.
Any final thoughts? Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
I can add to that, specifically because we're focusing on feedlots and, you know, some of our proactive messaging going forward. Once we created Guardians of the Grasslands, you know, that was the question. Okay, this is really supportive around cattle, you know, maintaining native grasslands. What about feedlots? And so we know that they're misunderstood, and we need to, you know, put a lot of resources behind that. But, you know, for your comment, David, you know, about this idealized image of beef production, I would say that that is really reality. You know, cattle are on grasslands or pastures or haylands, you know, for the majority of their life, so that it's not this picture that we put out, you know, to consumers but doesn't happen in reality. That is reality, you know, that is the majority of their life. You know, and another question that we see quite often is, you know, okay, these large feedlots, they must be large corporations. No, most of them are family owned. They're family operations, you know. So I would say it's more about saying, you know, this idealized image is actually what happens on the ground. And we're really looking to explore this role that feedlots play, you know, in the recycling of nutrients, you know, being vital to a circular economy where they're taking crop byproducts or crops damaged by weather, you know, and being able to, you know, upcycle that through cattle to become beef, you know, and then selling manure to their crop neighbor down the road. So they're really, you know, they're vital in this whole food system, and you know, especially for making beef accessible to all Canadians. That's really the role that they play.
Well, we are closing down on our time here. Again, we could probably talk for another hour on this. I do want to thank Clay, John, Michael, Amy for really insightful comments, for playing along with some of my questions, and really appreciate it. Good to see you. And thank you to everybody who watched. Amy, I'm going to hand it to you because I know you're going to wrap up our session. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, just want to say thank you for everybody for coming today. You know, and closing thoughts, I would just say that, you know, what we've seen as our biggest challenges presented by the research matches perfectly with our largest opportunities. So, you know, consumers are worried about environmental impacts, and the benefits for the environment is the largest role that the beef industry plays. So it's about finding those opportunities, you know, to connect and engage and just share the great story of Canadian beef production. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you all so much. Thank you, David, for moderating that. Thank you, Amy, Clay, Michael, John, panelists. Really appreciate your time, your insights, and some great pieces there, and certainly a process we're moving forward with. So thank you for all your time and being here today. And if there's any other questions, staff will get back to you. I think I did just want to chime in. We certainly do have beef sustainability defined, and I think it's more in terms of getting our messages out there, but environmentally sound, socially responsible, and economically viable. So definition as we followed along the global roundtable for sustainable beef. So that's something to remember as we move forward as well. Thank you everyone else that has joined us for the last 2 hours in terms of being an attendee here at our semi-annual meeting and showing your interest in our work, and the engagement is appreciated. You see the date for our AGM, September 28th, will again be virtual. And again, reminder in advance of that meeting to reach out if you've got any interest in terms of nominations, elections to council. I encourage you to reach out and ask the question and learn more of what it's all about. And I think we've got one final slide to bring up. There are lots of places to find out more about the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Certainly our website, CRSB.ca. You heard the consumer-facing website, beeffortheplanet.ca, Guardian of the Grasslands.ca, and certainly more information on our certification program under that CRSB certified.ca. So check it out. And again, really exciting news today in terms of, and you heard it from the panel, about we need to certainly show as an industry that we're moving forward and doing setting goals. And today was an exciting day to launch those goals that you heard from Brennan Grant, 10-year, very ambitious industry goals that are going to show our consumers that we certainly are striving to do the right thing. So with that, I'm going to send you on your way. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.